Next is Senate Bill number 219 by Senator Acosta, an act relating to state affairs and government housing construction. Senator Acosta, welcome.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you, and thank you to all the members of the committee and all the folks at home watching or listening. Before I start, I'd be remiss not to thank all the people power that went into the development of this bill. I am simply a mouthpiece. This bill is the result of an effort of a broad coalition, including some folks like Renew, Sunrise, the BLM, PAC-RI, and dozens of others. So I want to just thank them, and you'll be hearing from them later on in today's committee meeting. But I want to get into the meat and bones of this, and I don't want to be redundant, but we know that we have a housing crisis in Rhode Island. We've said this in countless committee meetings, in this committee and other committees, and we're acknowledging that it's now time to address the problem. So this bill goes really, really deep into addressing the problem. I'll hit some of the major points and be happy to answer some questions afterwards. But the first part of this bill, through the Housing Jobs Program, sets out to build approximately 6,500 units of affordable housing across the state in the next 10 years, the next decade. Those units would be split between about 55 to 60% units, which would be set rate units, and the rest would be market rate units. The set rate units would be required to pay no more than 20% of the gross income on rent for the folks who would be living in them. Now, the construction would be done through project labor agreements. These PLAs would be pre-hire agreements that allow workers to negotiate for fair wages, benefits, and working conditions through collective bargaining before construction begins. Important to note, all the housing in the Housing Jobs Program will be high energy efficient, equipped with rooftop solar, and would dramatically reduce the carbon footprint that we have right now. The Solar Jobs Program, which is the next part of this massive bill, would install 4 kilowatt rooftop solar panel systems on approximately 3,300 homes each year, or 33,000 homes over the next decade. The plan is to have these solar system cuts the average homeowner's electric bill by approximately half. Now, what this looks like in practice is a $150 million investment per year over the next decade, making this a $1.5 billion investment on construction and housing. Finally, we have the last part of the bill that looks at the utility costs on many of the cost-burdened families that this bill aims to support. In this, we would look at customers who are below 300% of the federal poverty line, or $38,640 for a one-person household, and make it so that they cannot be charged more than 2% of their annual gross income on utilities. The utilities companies would have to recoup these losses by either increasing the charges on wealthier households or reducing shareholder profits. I assume that one of the questions that may come up, and so I'll try to get in front of it now, is how we might pay for some of these things. And you should know, and you probably do from some of my other work on our assembly here, that I believe in raising taxes on the wealthiest 1% of Rhode Islanders, those households that make above $467,000 a year. And if we did that, if we raise those taxes by 5%, we'd generate approximately $170 million, which on its own would cover the $150 million per year sticker costs of this legislation. Some other funding streams could be increasing the conveyance tax to 2% for single-family homes worth over $500,000, which would generate approximately $34.4 million. And finally, the legalization of cannabis, which we know we have on the table and is predicted to have modest tax revenues in its early years, but much greater ones as the market develops. So happy to answer any questions. Thanks again for your time, and looking forward to the testimony of all the advocates who supported this bill.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Yes, Senator Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. I have many concerns. I've been reviewing the bill, and there is a lot to digest. It is a very extreme bill. Some of the concerns I have was the tenant-landlord language in it, and also I have issues with subsidizing, and I don't have issues with subsidizing some of the electrical costs that's in this bill, but some of the things that are in this bill are causing the high costs of the electrical bill. And some of the things that are causing that is our push to green energy. And we can all discuss issues on that, but we subsidize green energy, and we try and front load it. So while we subsidize green energy, it in turn, to help the environment, it in turn costs more money in the electric bill. And the result of that electric bill in turn becomes the people that can least afford it. is the ones on the lower end, the lower and moderate income. So the answer, after we subsidized the green energy and created the problem, is to subsidize the electric bills on the ones that can least afford it. And it's almost like a dog chasing its tail.
Yeah, it's circular. Yeah.
And I've had this discussion with a couple of my colleagues, and there is just so much in this bill to unpack. I'm not even scratching the surface of it. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in this, and that's I just wanted my feelings and my thoughts put up front on this one. So I shoot from the hip. Anyway, that's all.
And I appreciate that. We spoke a little bit about this actually last week, and I would provide two quick answers to your point about utilities costs in particular. The first is that part of the way that we get charged more for the installation of green infrastructure is that we're relying on the utility company itself to install it. In this case, we would be paying for that installation. So we would not be allowing the utility company to charge us for the cost of stuff that we're already paying for. Now, the second part is, I think you're totally right that it could feel unfair for higher earning households to have to subsidize the cost. So I think a simple way around this and a nice happy medium would be to cap the profits that the utility companies can make off of us, right? We all need to use these utilities. And so because of that, it's inherently public, and yet there's a private profit being gained from them. And so we could turn and say, look, we're going to cap the amount that you could get for something that we have to use, not something that we use optional. We're happy to talk about it more and talk offline as well.
Thank you, Senators. Any other questions? Yes, Senator Lombardi.
Thank you. Not so much a question, but a comment. I understand my colleague's position on the bill. I received, I would say, a dozen calls today, and the provision raises a lot of issues with the latter part of the bill that talks about the eviction process, and it seems to be superimposed in this bill. And quite frankly, had I not been led to it by these folks, I probably would have not paid much attention to it. However, it rises to the same level as the concerns that we had last week, particularly where we're delving into telling the district courts what to do in terms of evictions and what types of evictions they can hear. And so I understand their concerns for the same reasons that I expressed concerns last week about those bills and how I think it usurps the power of the courts in the first instance. And secondly, I think puts an unfair advantage for tenants in a landlord-tenancy situation. I would urge my colleagues to read that section of the bill that deals, it seems to be dealing with something extraneous to the true purpose of the bill when it adds in this eviction process at the end. So I don't want to be repetitive because I spoke about this last week, but for that same reason, that's why I have a concern with 219
Thank you.
in the back part of the bill.
Thank
you, Senator Lombardi. And if I may quickly address that, I would say that we can't have it both ways. So we pushed people out of public housing by stopping our construction of it and turning to a voucher system in the context in which we did not have the market availability to support that voucher system, right? So what happens is we don't have enough units for the people that we need to house. And so if we build more units, we'll have less of these issues of tenants fighting with private landlords. So, I'd be happy to strike that section or to look for a happy medium on the eviction proceedings if we actually had places to house people and weren't throwing them with a voucher pretty much worth nothing into a market that has no stable, safe, affordable housing for them.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, the last thing I want to do is get into a dialogue with the sponsor, and I certainly didn't mean to, and I certainly would speak through the chair at all times. But my concern is a little bit more significant than that. I think that we heard last week from the Attorney General's office, and I think parenthetically from the Chief Justice of the District Court, that such legislation borders on an unconstitutional usurpation of separation of powers. So that's the concern I have. I don't want to debate in terms of the bill. My concern is a constitutional one, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions from committee members? Thank you. Thank you, Senator Acosta.